The barren fig tree from the Amplified. Now early in the morning, as Jesus was coming back to the city, he was hungry. Seeing a lone fig tree at the roadside, he went to it and found nothing but leaves on it. And he said to it, "Never again will fruit come from you." And at once the fig tree withered. When the disciples saw it, they were astonished, and asked, "How is it that the fig tree has withered away all at once?" Jesus replied to them, "I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, if you have faith, personal trust and confidence in me, and do not doubt or allow yourself to be drawn in two directions, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' it will happen, if God wills it. And whatever you ask for in prayer, believing, you will receive." When he entered the temple area, the chief priests and elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what kind of authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority to exercise this power?" Jesus replied to them, "I will also ask you a question, and if you tell me the answer, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, from where did it come? From heaven, that is, ordained by God, or from men?" And they began debating among themselves, considering the implications of their answer, saying, "If we say, 'From heaven,' he will say to us, 'Then why did you not believe John?' But if we say, 'From men,' we are afraid of the response of the crowd, for they all regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what kind of authority I do these things." What do you think? There was a man who had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, "Son, go and work in the vineyard today." And he answered, "I will not." But afterward he regretted it and changed his mind and went. Then the man came to the second son and said the same thing, and he replied, "I will, sir." But he didn't go. Which of the 2 did the will of the Father? The chief priests and elders replied, "The first one." Jesus said to them, "I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, that the tax collectors and the prostitutes will get into the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you, walking in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes did believe him. And you, seeing this, did not even change your mind afterward and believe him, accepting what he proclaimed to you. Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard and put a wall around it and dug a wine press in it and built a tower and rented it out to tenant farmers and went on a journey to another country. When the harvest time approached, he sent his servants to the tenants to get his share of the fruit. But the tenants took his servants and beat one and killed another and stoned a third. Again he sent other servants, more than the first time, and they treated them the same way. Finally he sent his own son to them, saying, "They will respect my son and have regard for him." But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, "This man is the heir. Come on, let us kill him and seize his inheritance." So they took the son and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. Now when the owner of the vineyard comes back, what will he do to those tenants? They said to him, "He will put those despicable men to a miserable end and rent out the vineyard to other tenants of good character, who will pay him the proceeds at the proper seasons." Jesus asked them, "Have you never read in the Scriptures, 'The very stone which the builders rejected and threw away has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is a marvelous and wonderful thing in our eyes.'" Psalms 118, 22, 23. "Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to another people who will produce the fruit of it. And he who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, but he on whom it falls will be crushed." When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they understood that he was talking about them. And although they were trying to arrest him, they feared the people because they regarded Jesus as a prophet. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And he sent his servants to call those who had previously been invited to the wedding feast, and they refused to come. Then he sent out some other servants, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I prepare my dinner, my oxen and fattened calves are butchered, and everything's ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they paid no attention. They disregarded the invitation, treating it with contempt, and went away, one to his farm and another to his business. The rest of the invited guests seized his servants and mistreated them, insulting and humiliating them, and killed them. The king was enraged when he heard this, and sent his soldiers and destroyed those murderers and burned the city. Then he said to the servants, 'The wedding feast is ready, but those who were invited were not even worthy. So go to the main highways that lead out the city and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find.' Those servants went out into the street and gathered together all the people they could find, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests sitting at the banquet table. But when the king came in to see the dinner guest, he saw a man there who was not dressed appropriately in wedding clothes. And he said, 'Friend, how did you come in here without wearing the wedding clothes that were provided for you?' And the man was speechless and without excuse. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him into the darkness outside. In that place there will be weeping over sorrow and pain, and grinding of teeth over distress and anger. For many are called, invited, summoned, but few are chosen.' Then the Pharisees went and conspired together, plotting how to trap him by distorting what he said. They sent the disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, 'Teacher, we know that you are sincere, and that you teach the way of God truthfully, without concerning yourself about what anyone thinks or says of your teachings. For you are impartial and do not seek anyone's favor, and you treat all people alike, regardless of status. Tell us, then, what do you think? Is it permissible, according to Jewish law and tradition, to pay a poll tax to Caesar, or not?' But Jesus, aware of their malice, asked, 'Why are you testing me? You hypocrites! Show me the coin used for the poll tax.' And they brought him a denarius, which was a day's wage. And Jesus said to them, 'Whose likeness and inscription is this?' They said, 'The Emperor Tiberius Caesar's.' Then he said to them, 'Then pay to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.' When they heard this, they were caught off guard, and they left him and went away. On that day, some Sadducees, who say that there's no resurrection of the dead, came to him and asked him a question, saying, 'Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies leaving no children, his brother, as next of kin, shall marry his widow and raise children for his brother.' From Deuteronomy 25:5. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, and having no children, left his wife to his brother. The second also died childless, and the third down to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died. So in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all have married her.' But Jesus replied to them, 'You are all wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures, which teach the resurrection, nor the power of God, for he is able to raise the dead. For in the resurrection neither do men marry, nor are women given in marriage, but they are like angels in heaven, who do not marry, nor produce children. But as to the resurrection of the dead, have you not read in the Scripture what God said to you? I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living.' When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Now when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced and muzzled the Sadducees, they gathered together. One of them, a lawyer, an expert in Mosaic law, asked Jesus a question to test him. 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment of the law?' And Jesus replied to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That is, unselfishly seek the best or higher good for others. The whole law and the writings of the prophets depend on these 2 commandments.' Now while the Pharisees were still gathered together, Jesus asked them a question. 'What do you Pharisees think of the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed? Whose son is he?' They said to him, 'The son of David.' Jesus asked him, 'How is it then that David, by the inspiration of the Spirit, calls him Lord, saying, the Lord,' parentheses, the Father, said to my Lord, the Son Messiah, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. Psalm 110:1. So then if David calls him, the Son, the Messiah, Lord, how is he David's son? No one was able to say a word to him in answer, nor from that day on did anyone dare to question him again. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and said to his disciples, saying, the scribes and Pharisees have seated themselves in Moses' chair of authority as teachers of the law. So practice and observe everything they tell you, but do not do as they do, for they preach things, but do not practice them. The scribes and Pharisees tie up heavy loads that are hard to bear and place them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not lift a finger to make them lighter. They do all their deeds to be seen by men, for they make their phylacteries, Teflon, wide to make them more conspicuous, and make their tassels long. They love the place of distinction and honor at feast, and the best seats in the synagogues, those on the platform near the scrolls of the law facing the congregation, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplace and public forums, and to have people call them rabbi. But do not be called rabbi, teacher, for one is your teacher, and you are all equally brothers. Do not call anyone on earth who guides you spiritually your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Do not let yourselves be called leaders or teachers, for one is your leader teacher, the Christ. But the greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be raised to honor. But woe, judgment is coming to you, self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven in front of people, for you do not enter yourselves, nor do you allow those who are in the process of entering to do so. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you swallow up widows' houses, and to cover it up you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive the greater condemnation. Woe to you, self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel over sea and land to make a single proselyte convert to Judaism, and when he becomes a convert you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears an oath by the sanctuary of the temple, that is nothing, non-binding. But whoever swears an oath by the gold of the temple is obligated as a debtor to fulfill his vow and keep his promise. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the sanctuary of the temple and that sanctified gold? And you scribes and Pharisees say, whoever swears an oath by the altar, that is nothing, non-binding. But whoever swears an oath by the offering on it, he is obligated as a debtor to fulfill his vow and keep his promise. You spiritually blind men, which is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, whoever swears an oath by the altar swears both by it and by everything offered on it. And whoever swears an oath by the sanctuary of the temple swears by it and by him who dwells within it. And whoever swears an oath by heaven swears both by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you give a tenth tithe of your mint and dill and cumin, focusing on minor matters, and have neglected the weightier, more important moral and spiritual provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness, but these are the primary things. You ought to have done without neglecting the others. You spiritually blind guides, who strain out a gnat, consuming yourselves with minuscule matters, and swallow a camel, ignoring and violating God's precepts. Woe to you, self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of exhortation and robbery and self-indulgence, unrestrained greed. You spiritually blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the plate, examine and change your inner self to conform to God's precepts, so that the outside, your public life and deeds, may be clean also. Woe to you, self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. So you also outwardly seem to be just and upright to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, self-righteous scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build tombs for the prophets and decorate and adorn the monuments of the righteous. And you say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have joined them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up, then, the allotted measure of the guilt of your father's sins. You serpents, you spawn of vipers, how can you escape the penalty of hell? Therefore, take notice. I am sending you prophets and wise men, interpreters, teachers, and scribes, men educated in the Mosaic law and the writings of the prophets. Some of them you will kill, and even crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues, and pursue and persecute from city to city, so that on you will come the guilt of all the blood of the righteous shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah the priest, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, the judgment for all these things, these vile and murderous deeds, will come on this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who murders the prophets and stones to death those messengers who are sent to her by God, how often I wanted to gather your children together around me, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were unwilling. Listen carefully. Your house is being left to you, desolate, completely abandoned by God, and destitute of his protection. For I say to you, you will not see me again, ministering to you publicly, until you say, Blessed to be celebrated with praise is he who comes in the name of the Lord. From Psalm 118:26. Jesus left the temple area and was going on his way when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to the magnificent and massive buildings of the temple. And he said to them, Do you see all these things? I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, not one stone here will be left on another which will not be torn down. While Jesus was seated on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, Tell us, when will this destruction of the temple take place? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end, completion, consummation of the age? Jesus answered, Be careful that no one misleads you, deceiving you and leading you into error. For many will come in my name, misusing it and appropriating the strength of the name which belongs to me, saying, I am the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed, and they will mislead many. You will continually hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for those things must take place, but that is not yet the end of the age. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. But all these things are merely the beginning of the birth pangs of the intolerable anguish in the time of unprecedented trouble. Then they will hand you over to endure tribulation, and will put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will be offended and repelled by their association with me, and will fall away from the one whom they should trust, and will betray one another, handing over believers to their persecutors, and will hate one another. Many false prophets will appear and mislead many. Because lawlessness is increased, the love of most people will grow cold. But the one who endures and bears up under suffering to the end will be saved. This good news of the kingdom, the gospel, will be preached throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end of the age will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation, the appalling sacrilege that astonishes and makes desolate, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains for refuge. Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things that are in his house, because there will not be enough time. Whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his coat, and woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. Pray that your flight from persecution and suffering will not be in winter or on a Sabbath, when Jewish laws prohibit travel. For at that time there will be a great tribulation, pressure, distress, oppression, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. And if those days of tribulation had not been cut short, no human life would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, God's chosen ones, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you during the great tribulation, Look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christ and false prophets will appear, and they will provide great signs and wonders, so as to deceive, if possible, even the elect, God's chosen ones. Listen carefully. I have told you in advance. So if they say to you, Look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out there, or Look, he is in the inner rooms of a house, do not believe it. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming in glory of the Son of Man. Everyone will see him clearly, Wherever the corpse is, the vultures will flock. The Greek for vultures can also be translated eagles, but the reference is most likely to the vulture, which the Greek word includes with eagles as a class. The meaning of this much discussed verse is either that the corpse represents the returning Christ whose appearance will attract the attention of the entire world, that is, the vultures, or that the corrupt world is the corpse about to be judged by the returning Christ. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not provide its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And at that time, the sign of the Son of Man coming in his glory will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth, and especially Israel, will mourn, regretting their rebellion and rejection of the Messiah. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory and brilliance and splendor. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather together his elect, God's chosen ones, from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its young shoots become tender, and it puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you too, when you see all these things taking place, know for certain that he is near, right at the door. I assure you and most solemnly say to you, this generation, the people living when these signs and events begin, will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth as now known will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But of that exact day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son in his humanity, but the Father alone. For the coming of the Son of Man, the Messiah, will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the very day when Noah entered the ark. And they did not know or understand until the flood came and swept them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. Unexpected judgment. At that time, 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken for judgment, and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken for judgment, and one will be left. So be alert, give strict attention, be cautious and active in faith. For you do not know which day, whether or far, near or far, your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the head of the house had known what time of night the thief was coming, he would have been on alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you who follow me must be ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom his master has put in charge of his household to give the others in the house their food and supplies at the proper time? Blessed is that faithful servant when his master returns and finds him doing so. I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that servant is evil and says in his heart, my master has taken his time, he won't return for a while, and begins to beat his fellow servants and eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour of which he is not aware, and will cut him in two and put him with the hypocrites in that place. There will be weeping over sorrow and pain, and grinding of teeth over distress and anger. Referring back to one will be taken and one will be left. This, according to the Greek Amplified, this is not the removal of the church as described in 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18 and Revelation 3:10. The one taken is for judgment, just as the wicked were taken by the flood in Noah's day. The one left is left to enter the kingdom that Christ will establish. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.